guys, it's Miss Sinclair from University High School with a continuation of the Unit 7 lectures for AP World History Modern. Today we are going to be talking about fascism. So when you hear dictator, what comes to mind? I want you to think about what images appear in your head, what kind of behaviors, what kind of person is a dictator? What do they do? How do people react? How are they remembered in history? So, one of the things I want us to be thinking about today with fascism is the AP objectives with 7.6 and 7.7 about World War II. So our objective today is that you'll be able to compare and contrast Mussolini and Hitler, and we are aligning with the AP objectives of topic 7.6 and 7.7. You can also make a connection here to the AP objectives asking about how governments react to different economic crises, right? One of the things we'll see is that these fascist leaders emerge out of the Great Depression. So let's get started. So the rise of fascism. Let's define it first. So fascism is an authoritarian nationalist regime. Fascism is going to attack the weakness of democracy, the corruption of capitalism, and will take control of the economy to reduce social friction. So here's a couple interesting things about fascism. Is that it is going to emerge as a popular choice because people are scared and they are frustrated. Like I said in the last lecture video, if you feel that you can feed your kids and that there is a future for your children, you do not feel the need to overthrow the government. But when you can't do those things, then you start to feel scared and trapped, and you will choose more and more radical leaders to try and resolve your situation. The idea is sometimes that less that the leader has really good ideas and more that any change must be better than what we have now. We see that in the Great Depression. We see that in the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution. And it's important to think about the Soviet Union and Stalin. So even though Stalin's purges are highly censored in the Soviet Union, everyone knew about them, and everyone knew about them in the West as well. People are scared and they are mad. They're worried about the spread of communist Russia. Frankly, World War I made people mad all over, especially though in Southern and Central Europe. There they're feeling bitter, right? They are being blamed for a war that they didn't choose to start. Their families are starving because they lost, right? The British played just as big of a role in starting World War I, and yet their families get to be fed every night. So you're looking for a scapegoat. You're looking for a reason to explain why things are bad. Well, they'll start to blame ethnic minorities, particularly the Jews. So there's a long history of anti-Semitism in Europe, and it is going to arise in moments of crisis. So think about during the medieval period, during the plague, right? And now during the Great Depression. When they think back about a pre-World War I Europe, people imagine a world that doesn't exist. They imagine perfect family farms and small shops and everyone's living in community. It's kind of like how people imagined the 1950s, right? Of these safe small town communities where everyone knew each other and kids could go out and play outside without getting kidnapped, and everyone had a job, and it was all so great. That reality never existed. Similarly, the perfect image of the German farm and small community never existed either. Take a moment to look at that political cartoon. What's the message of it? So I think it's interesting to see. One, this is clearly a German soldier. You can look at it from the shape of the helmet. Two, he's clearly in a trench. Three, he is being stabbed in the back by a Jewish housewife. How do I know that she's Jewish? Well, the Star of David on her chef's cap, and then also the stereotypical imagery used. This is clearly very anti-Semitic. The large nose, the large lips, but the curly hair. These are images, symbols that cartoonists will use when trying to depict someone who's Jewish. So this is clearly a very anti-Semitic cartoon, blaming the Jews for not fully supporting the German army. It's their fault, right? If they had had that more support, then we wouldn't have this problem. So, fascists are ultimately politically radical. They used wartime propaganda techniques to appeal to citizens. They promised to bring back full employment by any means necessary. And they also promised to stop the spread of communism. You might be thinking, really, was Stalin interested in invading his neighbors? That's not the point. Within every European country, there was a significant socialist political party and movement, and there was often an increasingly large communist movement. With the Great Depression, clearly capitalism failed. Well, the economy's booming in Soviet Russia, maybe communism is a better option. People are scared of that. So fascism is going to promise to stop communism. And they're going to promise to achieve the territorial conquests that World War I had denied them, right? They were promised land. They thought they would get all this territory from World War I. Think about Italy. Think about Germany. Here's the interesting thing. I want us to take a moment to compare and contrast communism and fascism in terms of how they functioned. In one interesting thing is that fascists and communists hated each other. They despised each other so aggressively. And yet, they functioned in very similar ways. They both were all about a single political party with no dissent. They both used secret police. They both ruled with terror and intimidation. In both governments, you had an authoritarian leader, and the government controlled the economy. So, structurally, practically, communism and fascism were very similar, and yet fascists and communists hated each other, and their ideology would be very different, right? Fascism is all about nationalism, where communism is all about sort of equality among the social classes. So why is this even going to be appealing? Well, frankly, people are frightened by rapid change. Think about what I talked about in the last video about the interwar period. Think about how quickly things are changing. The borders in Europe are dramatically different. The technology being used is dramatically different. Now you have telephones, now you have the radio, now you have film. Women are behaving differently. Children are behaving differently. So people are scared and kind of overwhelmed by all of these changes. So they will place their hopes in charismatic leaders who promise to answer all of their problems. Mussolini will really be the first, and many others will copy him. We will see fascist leaders appear in Latin America, Germany, Spain, China, and Japan. So let's start by talking about Spain a little bit. So in Spain, Francisco Franco brings the fascist party, the Falange, to power through the Spanish Civil War, 1936 to 1939. So Franco is a general in the Spanish military, and he will end up winning after 3 years of fighting. So in this fight, Germany and Italy will side with the fascists, whereas the Soviet Union will seek to support the communists in Spain, but also the Spanish Republicans. The Spanish Republicans are people who want a democratic republic system. Spain had a monarchy prior to this point, and now you have a chance for a huge shift. In many ways, the Spanish Civil War is viewed as a dress rehearsal for World War II. Hitler and Mussolini help Franco's fascist government. The Soviet Union provides military aid to Spain's Republican government, and in the end, the fascists win. So, this is Guernica. It's a very famous painting by Spain's most famous artist, Pablo Picasso. Now, Pablo Picasso was living in Paris for most of his career, but he paints this to really capture the horror of war. And take a moment to look at it. So you see so much. You see broken bodies, you see swords, you see people screaming in pain. You see this woman here clutching her dead baby, sobbing. There's a horse, there's a bull, and a bull's often very symbolic of Spain. You have this single light in the room, and it also looks kind of like an eye. So there is a really great TED Ed video that talks about Guernica. It is actually black and white, in it's grayscale, and it's very large. So I would really recommend you go and you watch this to really understand how the Spanish Civil War is represented in art. This is a key part of history. Art reflects the historical context that it's produced in, and sometimes art is very consciously a commentary on what's happening in the world, and sometimes it is a unconscious reflection of the norms and standards. So you should watch that video after this. But now I want you to pause and see if you can answer these questions. Again, these small checks are useful to make sure that you actually are learning the information, not just hearing it, not just writing it down. So pause the video, and without looking at your notes, see if you can articulate why would fascism be appealing to people in Europe at this time, and what circumstances today might make fascism appealing again. So let's start with Il Duce. Mussolini. Benito Mussolini is going to be the fascist dictator of Italy from 1922 to 1943. Italy's going to be really the first country to seek radical politicians. World War I was never popular. It wasn't popular when the war was happening. The fact that Italy changed sides halfway through was kind of embarrassing. And they were supposed to get land out of this. They were supposed to essentially get Slovenia out of the war, and they didn't. So instead, you have thousands of frustrated, broke, wounded veterans. So these unemployed veterans and violent youths will band together to demand action and to intimidate politicians. They will be called fascisti. So Benito Mussolini is charismatic. He's great at speeches. You can see his speeches on YouTube today. And even if you don't understand Italian, you can just see his movements, the way he holds himself, his facial expressions. He is inspirational. You look at him and you think, yes, that's a man who is in control. That's a man who can lead us. He is going to talk about the great Italian nation, how warfare should be glorified, how World War I was embarrassing. Remember, Italy hasn't been a unified country for that long. So we will see that in 1919, Mussolini will form the Fascist Party, and it is his goal to restore Italy to the height of its past. Think Rome. So he really emphasizes aggressive nationalism, and he will use the Fascist Party to create a dictatorship in Italy. So he is going to use violence to repress strikes, to intimidate voters, and to seize local governments. And then in 1922, he threatens to march on Rome with his army of veterans and youths. And he says that unless you make me prime minister, I'm going to attack Rome. The government gives in. It's a ballsy move. So, for 20 plus years, he rules as prime minister. He puts members of his own political party in all the significant government positions. He crushed all opposition parties and jailed anyone who criticized him. This is going to be a norm of fascist governments, but it should also remind you of Stalin. He will take over the press, public education, youth activities, and will give employers more control over workers. So again, all of these things should sound very similar to what was happening in the Soviet Union. Censorship, indoctrination. We'll see the use of youths will be really important in any dictatorship, right? The Hitler Youth, the way that young people are going to grow up being indoctrinated with this message that the Soviet Union is the best, that Father Stalin's looking out for you. So actually, Mussolini ends up lowering living standards. And yet, more people are employed. So we're in the middle of the Great Depression, and he's reducing unemployment. And he will provide social security and public services to all Italians as well. He is going to argue that a corporate state would replace both capitalism and socialism with new national unity. And he's going to eliminate all of his opponents, direct nationalist propaganda, and begins government-directed economic programs and an aggressive foreign policy. Ultimately, he was not the ruthless radical or a competent administrator. He's all bluff. So, how is he able to do all of this? Oh, I'm sorry. I said all of that just now, so if you didn't get it, pause the video and jot down these ideas. So how was he able to get all this support if he was incompetent, if he was not a ruthless radical, and if he lowered living standards? It's political theater. Remember the theater states? We first talked about them with the Gupta Empire in India last semester. Well, theater states are all about putting on a good show. And you can create the illusion that the government is powerful and in control, even if in the background it is much less competent. So he gives these big bombastic speeches. You have these ginormous parades that we'll see again and again. You see huge signs everywhere. Il Duce is always right. He is going to use modern mass communications and advertisement techniques in politics. This is brand new. So being able to use movie footage and radio broadcasts, being able to use advertisements, he's going to whip the public into enthusiasm. They are going to love him. They adored him. And then he expands. So if you remember, when we talked about African imperialism, we noted that basically all of Africa was claimed by a European state in one way or another, with the exception of Ethiopia. Well, that's not going to last. In 1935, Mussolini is going to attack and win Ethiopia. Sorry about that. He is going to invade this independent state. And the League of Nations says, hey, don't do that. That's not very nice. We said that we weren't going to invade each other anymore. So, Italy, please give Ethiopia back its independence. And Italy goes, no, I'm not going to do that. And the League of Nations goes, well, we still don't like it. Boo-hoo. Like, we firmly disagree with your choice. So what? You have the land, you invaded, you were successful. So what if a bunch of suits write a firmly worded letter? Who cares? So in 1936, he will join Germany in the Axis Pact, and he will eventually be overthrown in 1943 when the Allies invade Italy. So, 10-minute history, Mussolini and Fascist Italy is a great one. I really enjoy it. I would encourage you to watch this to get a much fuller sense of how Mussolini came to power and what his rule was like in Italy. So pause. What circumstances led fascism to emerge in Italy, and what made Mussolini an effective leader? Okay, but time to talk about Germany. After World War I, the Weimar Republic is going to emerge. It is a new democratic government established to replace the German Empire. It is a result of the Treaty of Versailles, and it is a complete and utter economic failure. So, thinking about that AP prompt, how do various governments respond to economic crises? Yeah, the Weimar Republic responds terribly. They cannot manage this economic crisis at all. You have severe inflation. It is just embarrassing. So, Germany feels extremely humiliated post-World War I. It's not just that they lost, it's that they were forced to sign that guilt clause of the Treaty of Versailles that assigns all of the blame onto them. So they feel humiliated and ashamed. I want you to think about a time that you were humiliated, right? Maybe, I don't know, something happened in front of all of your classmates. Maybe someone very deliberately embarrassed you. When you feel humiliated, you want to do two things. One, you kind of want the ground to swallow you up, right? No one can see you. But that's just embarrassment. When you feel humiliated, you want to not be seen by anyone, or you also kind of want to punch everyone in the face. How dare they laugh at you? Right? Humiliation is more than just embarrassment or just feeling ashamed. There's also a desire for retaliation, a desire to get back at the people who made you feel like this. And that's how Germany's feeling. So this humiliation and the economic crisis facing Germany will lead to a rise of a fascist regime. Hitler is going to want to recoup Germany after World War I through an aggressive foreign policy, and the Weimar Republic's inability to combat the economic crisis will help the Nazis. Hyperinflation in the 1920s will wipe out Germany's middle class, and then you have the Great Depression. So you have no middle class before the Great Depression hits. Millions of Germans will blame the socialists, the Jews, and the foreigners for their troubles. So there's a long history of anti-Semitism. Think about the Dreyfus affair in Europe. Think about the reason why we have a Zionist movement at all. Think about the pogroms of Russia. And frankly, Stalin was pretty anti-Semitic too. So he's going to use propaganda to attract disillusioned citizens, extreme nationalism, and his plans will allow for economic growth. So, who is Adolf Hitler? Adolf Hitler is a radical German nationalist. He is going to lead the Nationalist Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazis, in the 1920s, then become dictator of Germany in 1933, and will lead Europe into World War II. He was born in Austria, joined the German army in 1914, and was wounded. His experience in World War I really radicalized him. And his Nazi party will really emphasize nationalism, racism, and war. There's been thousands of books written on Hitler. I don't know if there, other than maybe Jesus, if there is an individual in world history who has been more closely studied and his behavior more closely analyzed. I think one interesting thing is part of his appeal is going to be a desire for this clean living, right? He hated drugs, he hated all of these things. You know, he wanted people to be strong, to be healthy, and sort of this idyllic German family. Mom, dad, a couple kids, serving the country. And yet, he had his long-term girlfriend, Eva Braun. He was a drug addict himself, particularly late in life. So some historians, there's a really interesting book called Blitzed. It came out a few years ago. I read it. It's a good one. I would recommend it. But it's looking at drug use in Germany by the Nazi Party. And one of the things that its author articulates, his argument, is that Hitler's more erratic behavior and decision-making is a result of his increased drug use. The fact that he's high most of the time in the latter half of the war. Similarly, there are going to be about 1 million videos on Hitler. The History.com one is really good, but there's other excellent ones as well. I would encourage you to watch at least one video on Hitler. It will tell you a little bit about his background and his character and his rise to power. So, who are the Nazis? Well, they are a political party emphasizing nationalism, racism, and war. So, Hitler is going to be arrested, and while he's in prison, he will write a book called Mein Kampf, which means My Struggle, while in jail. It outlines his goals and beliefs. When it is first published, no one noticed it. Frankly, its ideas were just too crazy. In it, he articulates that there is a master race, the Aryans, aka Germans, Scandinavians, and Britons. And then you have the degenerate Alpines races of the French and the Italians. Then you have the inferior Slavs, Russians, and Eastern Europeans, who are only fit to be slaves to the master race. So his eventual plan is to conquer Russia and enslave them all. His most extreme hatred, though, is for the Jews. He blames every disaster Germany has ever experienced on the Jews, but in particular World War I. He glorified violence and looked towards a future war where the master race would defeat and subjugate the others. So I think an interesting point to return to with European Jews is how economically they were much different than many other Europeans. For the most part, we will find our Jewish populations living in cities, and they will not be doing agricultural work. In fact, we will see a large number of Jews working as merchants and in finance. Now, this is for a few reasons. One, laws put in place in the Middle Ages very explicitly kept Jews from owning land and being farmers. So, anti-Semitic laws in the past kept Jews from being farmers. And Christian beliefs about giving loans and charging interest will keep Christians from opening banks and loaning out money. But the Jews, not holding to those same Christian beliefs, will be able to be the financiers. They will be able to give loans and charge interest. So this is going to cause some resentment, right? You're always going to resent anyone you are indebted to, especially if you have to pay interest on that debt. Over time, as the Jewish population continues to be stuck in these cities, some of them will do very well for themselves. And so by the 20th century, there is this misconception that all Jews are rich, that they control the financial systems of the world, and they are part of a cabal to make their will put upon the earth. And of course, this is completely untrue. But if you're a poor farmer in Germany and you're just looking for someone to blame, you can see how that narrative would be very appealing. So, between 1924 and 1933, he has few followers. It's a tiny minority. Most Germans find his ideas too extreme. And then the Depression hits. And the unemployed believe the Nazi promises for jobs, and they start to support them. The property owners start to support them as well because they're scared of communism. So I think there's a couple things to note here. People are choosing their political leaders not based on necessarily their ideology, right? Anti-Semitism is a huge deal here, and obviously, it's if anti-Semitism wasn't a major part of the European attitudes, then we wouldn't have had the Holocaust. However, just like today, most people vote according to their pocketbooks. If the economy is going well, even if they dislike the character of the political leader, think about how many people might say, well, I don't like the things that President Trump says, but my portfolio's never looked better, right? You might dislike a leader as an individual, but if he or she is good for the economy, you might be willing to put up with their personal foibles just to make sure you can, again, pay rent, feed your kids, and feel like there's an economic future available for your children. Most of the German people are the exact same way. Apologize for that. They are unemployed, starving, and the Nazis promised jobs for all. Property owners are scared of losing what they have. They see what Stalin is doing in the Soviet Union, and they believe that this extreme nationalism will be the best way to block it. So look at this political cartoon here on the left. Nope, right, my bad. All right, so you see a skeleton, death clearly, climbing over the earth, flames behind him. He has the red star on his helmet. He's holding a gun and bayonet, and before him is a symbol. It is the Star of David, representing the Jews, and then the hammer and sickle, representing the Soviet Union. In his other hand, he's holding a machine gun. What do you think is the message of this cartoon? So, what are Hitler's ultimate goals? Well, first, to repeal the Treaty of Versailles. He hates that they have to pay these reparations. He hates that they lost all this land. He hates that the guilt clause is there. He wants to annex all German-speaking territories and then also take Poland. Finally, he wants to eliminate all Jews from Europe. So 3 out of those 4 points would have been okay to basically all Germans. And that last point would have been okay with some of them, right? So again, one of the most studied topics in psychology emerges out of the Holocaust. How could so many Germans kill their neighbors? How could they have let this happen? So in 1933, Hitler is elected Chancellor of Germany. So I think that's a really useful point to make. Hitler is elected. He doesn't take power by force. There's no violent revolution. He has a political party. His political party functions in the structure of the Republican Weimar Republic, and they win most of the votes. So Hitler is made chancellor. But it is then that he becomes a dictator and establishes a totalitarian government. So he makes the Nazi Party the only legal political party. All other political parties are illegal, and he puts their leaders into concentration camps. He puts Nazi believers in charge of every government agency, educational institution, and professional organization. So a totalitarian government is one that exercises massive control over virtually all of its citizens' actions. So the state should provide guidance and a return to tradition. So the Soviet Union would be another example of a totalitarian state. They are dictating how people should dress, who they should marry, who they should betray, where they should work, what they should learn, what they should eat. Right? There's a right way and a wrong way to exist as a citizen. So Hitler wanted a strong leader under a centralized state who could attack what he claimed were the Jewish influences in Germany. He copies Mussolini, lots of parades and propaganda, and he is ideologically opposed to the Soviet Union. So he is going to use the Gestapo, or the secret police, to arrest political opponents. Hitler is going to blame the Jews for a lot. Great video, TED Ed. How did Hitler rise to power? I'd encourage you to check it out. It looks at the process that would allow such a deranged megalomaniac to become such a powerful political leader, right? We look back and we're like, oh, of course not. We would never do that. Like, hindsight's 20/20, right? But sane, reasonable people, unless you're going to say that every single person living in Germany is an insane sociopath, right? There must have been a reason why Hitler was able to win an election. So, under Nazi rule, Jews had a really tough time of it, obviously, right? This is not a new idea, but we're talking pre-concentration camps, before the final solution. So he blames the Jews for excessive capitalism and for weakening the German spirit, whatever that means. He claims that they have weakened German, broadly, the Aryans, who are superior people. They have done this by intermarrying, by sabotaging the war effort or financial systems. So he begins to deprive the Jews of citizenship and civil rights. They are prohibited from marrying Aryans, quotation marks, around that last word. He is going to kick them out of all of their professions, so doctors, dentists, bankers, lawyers are now no longer to have those jobs, and he will confiscate their property. So after the 1940s, he will pursue a literal and complete elimination of the Jews. And in 1934, Hitler declares himself the Führer, the leader, and calls Germany the Third Reich. So the First Reich is the German Empire. The Second Reich is the Weimar Republic. So they are the Third Reich. He harkens back to the Holy Roman Empire. He views himself as a leader on the same level as like Julius Caesar or the Holy Roman emperors. One of the things Jews were forced to do is they were forced to wear a yellow Star of David on their clothing, being thus identifying that they are Jewish to anyone they might come in contact with. So this is a video from the Holocaust Museum located in Tel Aviv. I've been there. It was one of the most sad. It was just, they have the Holocaust Museum. There's many of them, and they have online tours, sort of virtual tours. I'd really encourage you to check it out. So on Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, it's when Germans really attacked the Jews, destroyed their homes, started to arrest them. I encourage you to check it out. This is a video from the Holocaust Museum. So, how is Hitler an example of a fascist leader? Think about the characteristics of fascism. How is Hitler an example of this? Now, compare and contrast Mussolini and Hitler and describe Hitler's rise to power. Remember, there are lots more videos on our YouTube playlist for Unit 7. I haven't done it yet, but I think I'm going to make a World War II specific playlist for all videos related to World War II to make it a little bit easier. I know I did the same thing with World War I. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask, and thanks for listening.